Welcome to Tree of Life Connection. Today our topic is faith and family in the fishbowl of life. Our guest today is Osceola Howard. She is a graduate of Oakwood University, and she has been in the ministry for over 40 years, working in both an evangelistical ministry as well as in administrative hospital care ministry. Welcome, Osceola.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Jennifer.
Great. So we're going to actually just ask you a few questions and talk about who are you, Osceola? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I am happy to share with you who I am. I am, first of all, a child of God, though many times I fall, but I get right back up and ask the Lord to help me. I am a widow now. Unfortunately, my husband was sick with ALS, and he passed away about a year and a half ago. But we had a great 40-year marriage, and I am the mother of two adult children now, Heather Nicole Howard, and also Seth Joseph Howard. And my husband and I were grateful to have them, and I still have them as our wonderful children. And like you said, I graduated from Oakwood College, and I taught for a while in my career, and then I worked for the health department. And the last 12 years, I have been retired.
Wow. So you've lived a full life, Osceola. I think, as we talk about faith and family in the fishbowl of life, just thinking about your work history, going to school, there's many things that when we talk about the fishbowl of life, that means that we're always on stage. Whatever we say, whatever we do, people are watching. Sometimes they're even making judgment on what we do and say. And we don't always realize how that can affect us. So when you hear about the fishbowl of life, what does that kind of mean to you?
The fishbowl of life means to me, as you said, that we are there in the fishbowl. And sometimes there's a big rock in the fishbowl. And if Jesus is that rock in the fishbowl in our minds, then no matter who sees us, no matter what is said about us, whether it's negative or positive, we can always, in that fishbowl, lean up against the rock that is in the fishbowl, which is Jesus.
Amen. I mean, I like that because, many of us have either aquariums or fish bowls in our homes, or we've seen them at restaurants in different places. And many times there's different fish that are in the fish bowl. It's not just us, but there are observers who are on the outside watching what we are doing. So as a Christian, what are some of the things you think that people really are watching us do or what they're concerned about in our lives?
If we say we're Christians, people, whether they are Christians or not, will zero in on that and watch that specific item to see if we are what we say we are. Sometimes if we say that we're a great musician, people will zero in on that and watch it to see how great of a musician we are. There are multiple things in life that people watch through that fishbowl. And like you said, sometimes it's an aquarium. We have a big, big family, but whatever it is, people are watching. Whatever's in their mind, that's what they're going to watch. But what we need to do is pray and ask the Lord to help us to just have grace and to do what he wants us to do. Because we can't please everybody who's looking in on the fishbowl, and we can't please everybody who's looking in on the aquarium.
Right.
So the one person that we need to make sure that we're pleasing is Jesus Christ in that fishbowl with us.
So give me an example, Osceola, where you have felt that maybe you were in the fishbowl or in the aquarium and that people were intentionally watching. Because I think you gave the example, if you're a musician, people are going to say, can she play or can he play? So give me an example of maybe in your life that you think that you have zeroed in on maybe a skill or talent that you have.
I will use my children. When we were pastors couple, I knew that everybody in the church had an interest in watching the pastoral family. So with the children, I knew that they would especially watch little offspring because so I was asking my daughter earlier, what was it? Did anybody, as she recalls, ever say anything to her to make her remember that she was the pastor's wife and pastor's daughter? I'm sorry. And when she was, one day we went to the church and we were just waiting for service to start, and she was just trying to have fun with her little friends, and she was running and running and running, and somebody stopped her and said, you are the pastor's daughter. You shouldn't be running in this church. And she was just a little girl. Excuse me. She was just a little girl, and it didn't faze her. But later on, she thought about it. She said, "Wow!" But I'm grateful that my husband and I never told them that they can't do certain things because they are the pastor's kids. But to do what we're training them to do, what the Bibles that we're training them in, the Christian principles. And so I think that helped her along. But yes, people were watching to see how the kids were acting. There's another example too, where my little son was sitting on my lap, and some of the people thought he was too big, so it was a lot of talk about that. But I was letting him sit there because he was crying or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I was letting him sit there to comfort him. Mm-hmm. And so in my mind, I thought, well, I realize that some of these people think he's too big for this, but he's sitting here now because I'm trying to comfort him. So in terms of that, I knew they were watching that, but in my mind, it did not matter what the other thoughts were because I knew what I was trying to do, and that was to comfort him. So yes, that's one area of my life where I realized for sure that people were watching us and watching our children as a result of being in the Fishbowl and pastor.
I like this story that you told of your daughter and your son, how you did not raise them saying you are the pastor's wife or children, and you cannot behave that way. You taught them in the ways of God, and that was your reference point. Back to the rock being in the fishbowl or in the aquarium, that was your reference point, more so than maybe the title that others had given to you and your family as you were in that fishbowl. And then, so I want to just kind of reiterate that even like you said, you knew why your son was sitting there. You knew the purpose of comforting him. What others thought at that moment was less important because you knew that what your son needed was comforting. And so I think that we as Christians, when we're in that fishbowl, when we're in that aquarium, when people are watching, they may not understand why we do what we do. But as long as we do what God asks us to do, and we're following God's plan, that is really the most important thing that we can do. I love that you gave those examples. One question that I have is, now that your children are older now, and do you still think that you're in the fishbowl?
You know what, Jennifer, every last person on the face of this earth is in a pool, at SeaWorld, in the water, where everybody's watching for some reason or another. Because somebody is always watching us, and we're always watching somebody else. We're usually watching each other. Mm-hmm. So yes, I still believe that I am not in a fishbowl now, but in like a big, big pond or big body of water, like at SeaWorld. But it's a blessing for all of us to be in that as it relates to Jesus, because if we have the love of Jesus in our hearts, we can be influential and spread that love around for all to see. We may not see everybody may not see us, but even in our small little circle, in our sphere of life, then people can look at us and hopefully see that we have Jesus in us. And sometimes we may fall, and it looks like we may not have Jesus in us, but that's when grace comes in and the Lord helps us and he forgives us and he picks us up, and he still helps us to be influential as it relates to other people seeing us and the love of Jesus in us.
I really appreciate you saying that we all, every single person is in this big fishbowl, aquarium, pool, lake, ocean of life. So when we're looking at others, we have to turn the mirror back on ourselves and say, what are they saying about me? What do they see in me? Do they see Christ in me? Do they hear Christ in me when I'm speaking? And so again, sometimes we're looking at others, but the Bible speaks clearly that we're not to judge others because we'll be judged by the same meat as we judge others. And so as we're looking on, people are looking on at us as well. And so I think we can't lose that important point that you brought forward, that we all are on stage every time we walk out the door, walk in church, walk in the store, wherever we are on stage. So let's talk.
And
Go ahead.
and it takes faith for us to believe that Jesus is going to be with us while we're on that stage. Sometimes we can go through such horrific problems and horrific issues that we don't believe that he can be with us on stage, and we hide and we don't want others to see us. But if we can pray and ask the Lord to help us to just have that faith to believe that he will live in us and we can help to influence others, that would be great. It will help more people, as it will help ourselves too.
Yes. And that's important that you brought forward the importance of faith, because really it's faith is not really seeing, it's actually believing when you don't see. And so give me an example, Osceola, where maybe in your life that you had to exercise that faith when you didn't really see what was going to happen, but it actually had to tie into having the faith as you were actually going through life's journey.
Well, when my two sisters and I were children, I think my youngest sister was 3 and my oldest sister was 10 years old, and I was 8 years old. And our dad decided that he was going to take off and leave and go to California. And he told us that one night. He said, girls, I think I'm going to go to California one day. And when we woke up in the morning, he was gone. And so more than for us at that stage in life, it was faith that my mom had to really embrace, because he left us in a big old house. And of course, there were lots of bills to pay, 3 little girls to raise by herself. So a lot of the emotional security was gone. A lot of the financial security was gone, with so many other things that were out the door as a result of the separation. But because my mom had such great faith in the Lord, she used to sing. As soon as he left, she used to sing so much. And I thought to myself, why is my mom singing so much? But she used to sing so much. And after I got grown, I realized that was good musical therapy for her, which helped to calm her. And with her faith, she trusted in God as a result, because she was our example. We were watching, and it increased our faith to know that we would be okay.
You gave a really good example, because it's actually what you're talking about, the fishbowl inside the family. Because when your father left, you actually saw certain things that happened with your mom through her singing, through her praising God, that also exercised faith in God while in a fishbowl, maybe with a lot of turbulence and waves, but you saw that she stayed faithful to God despite what went on. And so sometimes we don't realize that our children are watching us, or that other family members are watching us, as we go through the different issues of life. And that really is with family. There's a fishbowl as well. Would you agree?
I wholeheartedly agree, because, like I said, we were old enough to realize that he was gone. And she told me at my 8 years old, she said, make sure you keep this quiet until a little bit later. But what did I do? The very next day, I went and told the one child who went home and told her mom and that was it. Everybody knew by Sabbath. And oh, what a fishbowl that was. It just everything, all kind of talks and everything. But in spite of that, my mom she still stayed faithful. And she still had faith in Jesus Christ. And later on, by the way, I had to apologize to her for going and telling everything.
But sometimes that happens. I mean, especially when we're in that fishbowl, and feel like we need to share it with someone. Sometimes the timing is always important. Who we share it with is also important because sometimes people are not confidential. But as a child, you really did not understand how that ripple effect would go. And you may have told someone who you really believed that would keep it confidential, So, yeah, so within our families, we have fishbowl. Within our families, we have faith. I think that as I think about the fishbowl of life, when you're in the work environment, you're also in a fishbowl. And you mentioned that you taught for a while. What grade did you teach?
It was kindergarten, preschool for a couple of years, and then kindergarten. And oh, that was very interesting. It took a lot of faith because I had one, most teachers, if you teach for a little while, will always come in contact with one little child who has problems, who bring those problems from home. And I had one little child, and it was just, I had to pull out all of my creative stops to deal with him. But the Lord gave me strength, and it helped me to realize that he needed tons of love. And so he was just acting out one day, and I called the principal, had the principal to come in, and I told the principal what was happening, that we wanted him to pray. So he came in the classroom, and I told the children, the principal is here because he's going to have prayer for us. He's going to have a little short prayer meeting for us. And I said, first of all, your teacher needs prayer. And second of all, you as the students need prayer. And third of all, the one who is in the main person right here, who's having some sad times, needs prayer too. He's not the only one that needs prayer. When the principal prays for us, he's going to pray for everybody. And sure enough, he did. And that was faith for me to even do that, even though it was a Christian school, because some people don't want their children to have prayer outside of their home or even in the classroom, but we prayed anyway. And when we began to pray, when the principal began to pray, the little boy put his head down on the desk. He was only 6 years old, and he just started crying, and you could hear the grief coming out in his pitiful little sobs. And at that moment, I realized that the Lord was helping me with my faith, because that was the answer to my prayer. And I had faith to believe that the Lord was going to realize it, because of the little boy's crying and sobbing. And after that, he was much better. When he got in an uproar, he just ran around the courtyard and the schoolyard, and he ran off the energy. So yes, in the classroom, that was faith for me, that the Lord helped that little boy who needed it.
And I can actually hear through that story that you were looking at the boy. He was, in my mind, in the fishbowl. You were looking at him, looking at his behavior, maybe not understanding everything about him, but you knew that, we're going to go back to your analogy, the rock was in there with him. And that's why you brought the principal in to pray to help him in that situation. And I also believe that your students were looking at you through a fishbowl, and that boy probably was looking at you through a fishbowl to see how would you react to that bad behavior. Now, granted, as children, they don't necessarily analyze like we do, but right. It's a good thing that God used you to ask the principal to pray, which is really one of the things that we want to talk about when we're in the fishbowl, how important it is to pray, because sometimes we don't know what to do. We don't know what to say. We don't know how to react. We just don't know. And so prayer is such a critical part of being on stage as a Christian, because we want to let our light shine. And sometimes that, our light shining is that we have to pray that God will speak through us, work through us and act through us. So give me an example. You know, I love the example of the little boy. What about in your adult life? Have you had anything similar to that where you've had to pray about a situation that you saw God's hand just unfold right there in front of you?
Yes, just recent, yes. For the last year and a half, we have been praying. I have been praying that with the grief process, that the Lord will walk with us through this grief process as a result of losing my husband and my adult children, losing their wonderful father. He was wonderful to all of us. And so he was such a great leader, not only in the community and worldwide, but first of all, he was a great leader in our family. And all that was gone. And I prayed and asked the Lord to help me to have faith, to know that Jesus could help us through all of this grief. He could help me to start this new position in our family as the leader. He could help me to know how to do everything that my husband used to do. I won't name all those things, but prayer is working. At first it was, ounces of loads of paperwork, loads of this, loads of that. And I was trying to get used to it because I no longer have my leadership husband, but bit by bit, and with my adult children's encouragement and others encouraging me, the Lord has helped me. And I saw bit by bit that prayer being answered that I had, that God would be with us and walk with us through this entire process.
So that's a really good example of you putting your faith and your trust and your security in Jesus alone. I mean, even as sometimes there are things that God requires of us, or things become a part of our life, our new reality. The only way we're going to make it is with prayer and our trust in Jesus alone. And that's a really good example of how you have walked and talked with God along the way, and he's shown you, he's provided you support system through your children. And that's a blessing because, again, what they see you do will help them on their Christian journey as well as a parent. Because I think as children, we watch what our parents do. You gave a good example of your mother singing. During that difficult time, she sang, and people do different things during challenging times. It could be singing, could be praying, could even just be outreach and helping others. So many times people have various resources that they can use to help them transition from one reality to a new reality. And I've experienced that in my life as well, that when I've had to transition from what was standard practice or standard in my life into a new role, a new position, again, Christ has a way to lead and guide and direct and support us and to reassure us that we will and we can make it. And I think that's really important. So as I think about, Osceola, the things that you are doing now, what are some of the things you do just for your own enjoyment and for just kind of, just for fun?
Well, we have the coronavirus here, and the only time that I can get out is, of course, just to go grocery shopping, basically, and maybe to the post office, and that's it. Now, we used to walk.
Yeah.
Jennifer, you walked with me along with Dolores and also others of us who walked, and Angelina. But I still have had to find things to do. So I enjoy when we can is talking to my adult children. I enjoy, we bought a little puppy named Sade, and she has been a delight. She's a lot of work, but she's a delight to be with. Another thing I enjoy doing here at home, and that is sitting in the massage chair, and which is very therapeutic. I enjoy talking from time to time with friends on the phone. Yeah, there's a lot of creativity that the Lord has helped me to be able to do while we're quarantined or staying at home right now.
I find it interesting that you're intentionally, doing things that not only nurture your spirit and your soul, but you also are connecting with your adult children. Because again, sometimes when there's a little bit of a generational difference, you just never know how families are connecting. Again, all in the same fishbowl, right?
Right.
We have to show that we value each other while we're in that same fishbowl, you know? And so give me some examples of what you're doing with your children or out, showing that value or appreciation of them.
Yes. One thing that we like to do together sometimes is watch the news together,
Mm-hmm.
watch a movie together, and talk together. And then, of course, on Sabbath, most of the time, we like to sit in the dining room and eat together.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, yeah. And time is one of those things that people do not realize shows someone that you care, you value them. Simply listening to one another, simple gestures of kindness. I know a couple of months ago for your birthday, your daughter gave you a birthday party, a luncheon. So all of those things show as a family that the support that you have and that we can have by supporting one another, thinking of creative ways of saying, I appreciate you. I love you. You are important to me. Those are the things that I think within the home, when we hear those things, when we go out and people are watching us in the fishbowl, what we say, what we do, maybe even just having judgment on what we say or do. Within the family, when there's a strong support of affirmations and spending time together, it can help you through anything, most things that people may be saying outside the fishbowl. What would you say about that?
Yes, I would certainly agree. A lot of times we don't even know what people are saying when they're outside of the fishbowl. And many times they may tell us and they may not. But whatever it is that they're saying, again, we just need to keep it in our hearts to pray about it. If it's something that's negative, we need to take into consideration through faith. If this is something that the Bible supports, I'll take it as advice. If it's not what the Bible supports, or if it's just really inconsequential, then I'll just move on with my life. And I think that's the most important thing we can do to keep, and same for anybody, pastor's wife or anybody, that's the most important thing we can do to keep our own sanity.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to get flustered by negative things that people say outside of our fishbowl, but we also want to be blessed by positive things that they say or positive criticism that they have for us. But I think we should always check it against what the Bible says too, to make sure that it's okay. It's good criticism if it's going to be criticism.
Well, and the Bible talks about man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks on the heart. So some things what may appear to individuals may not be what is real. So I think that when we're very close to God, as you mentioned, and people may be saying things, we may or may not hear them, we may or may not know, we may just see how they're looking at us and we don't know what that means either. But if we realize that if we are staying close to God, man may be looking on the outside. It may appear one way, but then God knows our heart. And there's sometimes we may need to make adjustments, but other times we need to just let it go, let God handle it. The Lord said, vengeance is mine. And we don't get really caught up in being distracted with words and actions that may not align with the Bible. And I think that should be our main source of truth, is the word of God.
And Jennifer, sometimes we may be, because we're human, sometimes we may be negatively affected by those things that's outside of the fishbowl. And it may just take us down where we are feeling really bad about it. And then we ourselves may not feel close to God at certain times. But if we can just pray and ask the Lord to help us to have strong faith, even during those times, he can bring us back around where we should be.
I know there has been research that has been done that says that individuals who pray, they're more compassionate, they have a higher sensitivity to the needs of others. And I think that's important for us to really highlight here, because even if we are being criticized or maybe say things that are not true or whatever that is, when we pray to God and give it back to God, we can become compassionate towards those individuals who may be speaking, or more sensitive to what's going on in their lives. Because sometimes how we judge others is based on what we are going through ourselves or have gone through in the past. So I appreciate you saying that prayer is the key to really representing Christ in the fishbowl.
Yes.
It's the key to actually, accepting or even working through issues that others may be, what they may be saying. So I think that's an important point of prayer. We must hold on to that because we know
Uh,
that God is not willing that any should perish, whether they have good intentions, bad intentions. God is not willing that any should perish.
and through prayer, I believe that if someone has said something negative to us, that through faith, the Lord will open our intuition, open our perception, and help us to see why that person is saying what he or she is. You're right. Sometimes they're going through that very thing, that very issue. But I think, again, with prayer and faith, it will help everything to come together. It will help the other person, perhaps, that's outside of the fishbowl to understand, and it will help the person inside of the fishbowl to understand and come together. And that's a result of prayer, too.
Sure. This is probably a little difficult question, but if you're an onlooker, you're actually on the outside of the fishbowl and looking at someone on the inside of the fishbowl, and maybe their behavior is not Christ-like. What do you think your role is?
I think my role is, number one, to pray for them. Then another role of mine is to wonder if it's some action to wonder, is there something I can do to help myself, first of all, to approach this person in a correct way, or is it even my role to approach them? But my first response is to pray and ask the Lord to help me to search my heart first. And then if I feel or sense his wanting me to help the person, that he can help me in a positive way. And it may be that the person that I'm looking into in the fishbowl does not necessarily need my help, but he or she just may need direct help from the Lord. Then it's my responsibility to pray for them and not criticize them or go around spreading nasty lies and rumors about them, and just be kind to that person as much as possible.
I really appreciate you saying prayer first, and then you have to realize whether or not God even wants you to intervene, and then making sure that you're not passing on information about what you've seen. So I think it's important for us to pray first. Do I need to intervene? And then make sure that we're not telling what we've seen, because again, as I go back to what we see on the outside, only God knows the heart. And sometimes by praying for that situation, God can change the heart. And that behavior, that attitude can actually change. I've seen it in my life. I'm sure you've seen it in yours as well. Maybe a difficult situation, and you just took it to the Lord in prayer, and he actually resolved the issue.
Yes.
Would you like to share anything about that, or?
I did have a situation some years ago where we had a battle going on within our church. And we didn't understand why it was going on. So we prayed. And when I say we, I'm talking about my husband and myself. We prayed, and several Sabbaths later, it just broke. And few people came to the front and they apologized for the situation. And then even after that, we found out what the real deal was. The person that was kind of in the forefront of it all, we found out that he was having some terrible problems, and which caused a breakup in their relationship, he and his wife's relationship. And then we realized why we had all the problems. But the Lord answered our prayer, and he worked it so that everything could come together. And the outcome was good. He did work it out okay.
And that's really, really an important point, that we always want the outcome to be a godly outcome. There are times in my life, that I have actually prayed for God to give me discernment of when to say, what to say, when to say it, and how to say it. And I've seen God work. I've actually had times that he told me to wait for a year, wait for 3 years, wait this amount of time. And then he said, okay, now it's the time I want you to speak. And at the time that I spoke, the response was a favorable response. But had I
Yes.
spoken when I thought that it was an issue, and when it was maybe a disturbing issue or something uncomfortable, had I spoken then, it would not have had the same outcome. I'm very clear that praying to God for direction is our first defense when we are in the fishbowl of life. You know,
Absolutely.
you've been very, you've shared some wonderful information. I just want to give a little quick recap on some of the things that I heard. So we've been talking about, faith and family in the fishbowl of life. And we know the fishbowl of life, everyone exists in the fishbowl of life. Whether you believe it or not, someone is always watching what you say, what you do, and they have judgment. It could be good judgment, it could be bad judgment, but someone is watching what you do. So we're always on stage as Christians, and we want to make sure that we're always representing Christ, who is the rock. And again, if we can stay close to him by reading, studying, praying, witnessing, all of those things can help us to make it through. I also heard from you, Osceola, that sometimes we just have to sing. Singing is a form of prayer. Praying, singing and praying. Sometimes those go hand in hand. Sometimes we can't get the word out other than just saying, Jesus, help me. And it's not a long prayer or just give me peace. They can be simple words that can help us through a situation, because God hears and answers every single prayer that we have. We also talked about the importance of confidentiality. There are people who will be in the fishbowl, who are having challenges in their lives. And the most important thing we can do if they share it with us is to keep it confidential and pray with them. Because if we disclose that information or share that information with others, and if it gets into the wrong hands, it certainly can be detrimental to them. And our goal is to always uplift, to restore everyone, to the image of God, and have them the best outcome possible. Any last thoughts, Osceola, about our topic today regarding faith and family and the fishbowl of life?
Yes, we are all in the fishbowl of life. And those of us who are Christians, all these, and I'm saying this to myself too, we have Christian principles, and we let people know that we have Christian principles by what we say and by what we do. But I would like to say that when we go out and impart this message, sometimes we as humans we're giving the message out to other people to be Christians, as we're doing now, but sometimes we ourselves fall very short. But we need to ask God to continue to have grace on us. I'll tell you a quick story that I heard when my husband was in the seminary. This one pastor, there was a pastoral couple, and to make a long story short, he was spending a lot of time at the church, and she got very lonely. And as a result, she went to her doctor, and he bought this negligee for her, and then the affair was on. But the pastor's wife abruptly stopped it because she felt so guilty. She couldn't pray, she couldn't do anything, and she felt awful. And she finally confessed it to her husband. And instead of him getting mad with her and upset, he said, I am so wrong. He said, I forgive you. This is my fault because I should have spent more time with you. He said, I love you and I embrace you. And she said she had been an Adventist Christian all of her days, and that was the first time she ever saw and understood what grace meant.
Amen. Amen. And that's,
So,
yeah.
So we want to, the grace that I saw on that day, and it was very public, so I'm okay with sharing this.
Sure, certainly.
But she shared it publicly. But we want to remember to bestow grace on other people when they have misjudged us or mistreated us, just like God bestows grace on us, and we want to have faith to believe that he can continue to bestow that grace on us.
That's a story that I think really was a great way for us to summarize our talk today, because, there are times, and we've talked about the importance of showing our family members that they're valuable to us, the time that we spend with them, the affirmations that we give to them, even just, at celebrations, giving them gifts, showing appreciation is so really important to help people to know that they're valued within that fishbowl of the family. And so the grace that you just talked about that God bestows upon us is because he loves us so very much, and he's not willing that any should perish. So every day, we should be so grateful that God restores us. It reminds me of the song, God restores. He restores my mind, restores my soul. There are some times that we do not feel, our best self. And so God does restore. And the story that you gave helps us to be reminded that God, his grace, his love, his mercy, no matter what we go through, no matter if we fall, that he's going to restore us and bring us back to himself. And I think the good thing about it is you've never seen a fish drown per se. Have you?
I've never seen one.
Never seen it. So even if we're in that fishbowl, we don't have to worry about that drowning, because God says he will never, ever give us more than we can bear. And we know that we can say with every temptation, he will provide a way of escape. And so I think there's many Bible verses that we can quote as it relates to when we are in life situation, all of us, at work, at church, in the home, in the community, no matter where we are, someone is watching us, and what we say and what we do can either help them for eternity or know more about God or turn them away from God. So I think that's one of the things I would say. What final words would you give, Osceola, regarding, just give me your final words. If there's someone out there who's feeling that they're in a fishbowl, no one understands, what do I do? What hope can you give to them?
My hope would be to always remember, and sometimes we forget, but to remember that Jesus is that rock that's in that fishbowl with us. Sometimes we see these rocks in the fishbowl. So to remember that Jesus is with us and he is answering our prayer. And I want to quote that text, trust in the Lord with all thine heart and lean not unto thy own understanding. Sometimes we don't even understand ourselves why we're feeling like that, but we just need to trust God to be with us in the fishbowl, and he'll help us.
I want to end with the text that talks about that God is the author and the finisher of our faith. So I want to thank you, Osceola, for the time that you spent with me. We do want to remain faithful. We know that Christ is coming soon. And the faith that we exhibit right now is going to determine how we exhibit the faith when even more difficult trials may come. As you watch others in the fishbowl of life, and as you're on stage in the fishbowl of life, the most important thing is that you are praying without ceasing, praying to draw you closer to God, praying that you can keep your eyes on God and not criticizing the behaviors of others, praying so much so that you will see the good in all things. Thank you again, Osceola. Blessings on you.
Blessings. Thank you.